Hey everyone, you're listening to Founders Club. Today I'm chatting with Kim Anami. Kim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Des. It's great to be here.
Great to be chatting with you again, and we're going to dive all the way deep into what you do. I'm so excited. Kim, you are a holistic sex and relationship coach. How did you get into this space? Tell me the story.
Well, personal interest would be the number one reason. Over the years, where I've been on a path of personal growth and explored all kinds of different things from meditation, philosophy, spirituality, even holistic eating and exercise and sex for me it was always in my own experiences a really catalytic transformer. And so then later in my life, when I learned about Tantra and Taoism and found these ancient cultures that actually studied conscious sexuality and how to elevate your life with it, I was like, okay, this reflects my experience. And then I would have these encounters, and afterward, I would feel changed. I would feel healed. I would actually have some big healings take place in different areas of my life that I would attribute to having these really powerful sexual connections. And so in my work, I brought all that together where I have a really holistic perspective that pretty much everything and anything can be healed intimately, and that the process of doing that really self-actualizes us. So yes, it's all about pleasure and bliss and ecstasy, but it's also about self-realization.
Got it. Okay. So you really do take from various sources. So you described sexual energy as the creative force behind many of your projects and productivity and self-actualization. Can you walk us through one specific example of where you channeled that energy this way, and what did that look like?
So, yes, I always say that sexual energy is life force energy. This is the energy that creates new life. And if we're not creating babies with it, we can learn to consciously tap into it, harness it, and then channel it into our lives and into our creative projects. So, I've been practicing this for decades, and about just over 10 years ago, I'd come up with this idea. So I teach a vaginal weightlifting practice using a jade egg. So this is a jade stone carved in the shape of an egg that women use internally as a vaginal strengthening exercise. So I always love to come up with new ideas for how I market things and communicate them out into the world. And I'm a very playful person. I really um I'd say provocative, irreverent to a degree. And so I came up with this idea, hashtag things I lift with my vagina, that featured me traveling around the world, lifting objects indigenous to various regions with my vagina to showcase what vaginas can really do and what they're meant to do. And so that featured me. I was in Bali lifting coconuts and pineapples and mangoes. I was in Venice, Italy, lifting a Murano glass chandelier. I was in at the Berlin Wall in Germany, lifting a piece of the Berlin Wall at the Berlin Wall because you can buy them in souvenir stores, chunks of the wall. And I now dubbed it the Great Wall of Vagina. So and that went very viral. People were fascinated to see this woman vaginal weightlifting all over the world. But there's a deeper message under that, right? That this practice is hugely beneficial for women. But this is a way of communicating that's more fun and adventurous and creative and unique. And that's what I love doing because as a very taboo subject and one that people often have a lot of hangups and fear and anxiety around, having these additional ideas and playful ways of talking about it helps to penetrate into people and open them up to these ideas without feeling too serious or too clinical. All the information is there, but I'm presenting in a way that's more palatable.
I can see that. Yeah, definitely. And the virality as well piques folks' interest on what is more to this. So for my information and for those who also might not know, what is the correlation between vaginal strength and, that inner strength or that inner sexual energy that you're talking about? What does that correlation look like?
Yeah, so if this is our channel for our life force energy, and if we're disconnected from it, we're disconnected from a massive power source, right? This is actually the channel, the doorway of life. And so if we're not tuned into that energy, we're operating at a deficiency. So these kind of symptoms show up in people's lives in everything from sexual reproductive symptoms like difficult periods, difficult menopause, PMS, growth and cysts on the reproductive organs, low libido, lack of lubrication, erectile issues. And then that branches out into the rest of our lives in depression, overeating, addictive behavior, where we're craving some kind of connection and intimacy and fulfillment, and we're not getting it at the deepest possible level. And my assertion is that our sexual intimacy, that relationship with ourselves and with a really committed partner, is the answer to so many of our issues, is simply being seen, being loved, being cherished. And that nourishes us. I use the phrase gourmet sex versus junk food sex because it's such a building experience, restorative, healing, rejuvenating. So if so in the vaginal sense, it's like, okay, well, these are your organs of reproduction and creativity. And when women are disconnected, they'll manifest this myriad of symptoms. And at the very, basic physiological level, having a weak pelvic floor for women leads to incontinence, pelvic organ prolapse. And then when they strengthen that, they actually create this massive layer of support in the pelvic floor that channels all the way up into the body and even creates a facelift effect. I've had clients stop using Botox after using the jade egg because it's creating this overall lift in the body. So that happens. Libido increases, lubrication increases, orgasmic potential expands. Women are having orgasms. They had no sensation before. They were numb in the vagina, and now they can feel all kinds of sensations there. So, and their overall confidence builds because now they're connected to this part of themselves that they perhaps were afraid of and didn't want to touch or go near. They've really owned and occupied that part, and now they're channeling that energy in confidence, sensuality, like not giving a fuck what other people think about them, a real like I am who I am, you can take it or leave it kind of energy that comes through. So these are some of the benefits.
That is wild and fascinating, and I'm sure you get all sorts of reactions. But just listening to you, I'm starting to understand more and more. I also want to talk about the fact that you bring in a lot of different practices. So you have practices rooted in Tantra, Taoism, psychology and all different sorts. And so, how do you ensure that each framework, or how do you decide which framework to use per individual that you might be working with? And do you ever see that there might be conflicts between practices? How does that work?
Well, at this stage, I've been doing this for over 3 decades. And so my work is really a fusion and amalgamation of all of these things. And I don't necessarily handpick for individuals. I actually don't do individual sessions any longer. All of my work is in group programs online. So in these programs, I put together sequences and protocols of exercises, everything from meditations to guided visualizations to physical practices, self-massage practices, qigong, Taoist exercises for moving and recirculating and consciously directing sexual energy in the body. And then my overall philosophy is rooted in the idea that everyone can heal and everyone, something I call the Anami guarantee, which is that everyone can. Every woman is multi-orgasmic, can have G-spot, cervical, squirting ejaculations. Every woman can shoot ping pong balls with her vagina. Every woman can have a voracious libido and lubricate profusely. Every man can have a wild orgasmic experience. He can be multi-orgasmic, can learn to separate orgasm from ejaculation. Everyone can. So in some other philosophies or teachings, they might pat you on the head and say, oh, there, little girl, don't you worry about it. Some people can do that and some people can't, where my view is that everyone can. They just need to figure out what's blocking them from actually achieving these things. And that's the bulk of my work, is yes, there's a lot of techniques and practices, but a big part of that is simply uncovering the trauma or the negative beliefs that people have taken on that are getting in the way of them actualizing this potential that, like I said, I guarantee everyone has these abilities.
Amazing. And you know what, too? It's probably a lot of societal conditioning or cultural upbringing that may even put shame on people to have them think they don't have these abilities, or even maybe just trauma that comes upon them after, along their journeys in life. What's one simple, non-intimidating first step that you recommend to people and just recommend it for beginners to gain that sexual awareness in their journeys?
I would say start looking at what's possible. So, on my Orgasmic Enlightenment podcast, I share about these topics all the time, and I interview students of mine who've gone through my programs and had real breakthroughs and success with the work because then you see someone who thought they were just one of those people who couldn't, right? And then they applied themselves and they broke through into a whole new reality and life for themselves. So that's a great way to start. It's just to open your mind up to what's possible, right? And then you start to believe, okay, well, maybe it can be possible for me too. And then you start taking the steps to how to make that happen.
Well, you've empowered thousands through your online practices and programs and even in-person retreats, right? Can you share a moment or story that deeply affirmed your purpose in doing this work?
Well, I have them all the time whenever I am working with a couple or an individual and they break through something that, they didn't think that they could get through. I had a woman some years ago and she went through my programs and she'd had a history of sexual trauma and then she had corresponding physical symptoms of really brutally painful periods, severe endometriosis. And she dared to believe that if she could do this work and heal, that she could shift all these things. And so she was in my vaginal kung fu program, working with the jade egg. And bit by bit, like very slowly and patiently working with herself and committing to the process, she got really comfortable and at ease with her own body and her own sexuality that had been robbed from her through these traumatic experiences that she'd had and got to the place where she became multi-orgasmic, had a voracious libido, was much more connected to herself and her husband, and then her symptoms completely disappeared. Her endometriosis, her difficult periods evaporated. She went back to her doctor and they were baffled as to why this had stopped. And that was because she'd actually done this deep inner healing that these symptoms are always reminding us. If we haven't healed, the body reminds us that we need to. There's things that we need to look at. But in the allopathic model, the framework is more, well, your body is dumb. The symptoms are just for us to dominate and work that way rather than thinking, okay, the body's trying to tell us something, the psyche's trying to tell us something. What can we do to listen and acknowledge and heal? So that's my approach, right? And that's why I can actually get permanent healing success with people because we actually get to the root cause. We're not just throwing band-aids at people and trying to temporarily alleviate their symptoms, which is really an illusion because that's not healing. That's just a band-aid.
Right. Right. Wow. Well, you have so many things coming up. I know that we spoke before that you have a couple of programs starting soon. Where can people find you and sign up and learn more about the courses that you have to offer?
Right. So one of my signature programs for women called How to Be a Well Fucked Woman is opening for registration at the end of this month. And that's a 10-week online virtual program, really helping women to connect with their own sexual selves, a full range of the Orgasmopedia that's available to them, how to tap into their feminine energy, how to heal trauma, and then use these different practices I teach to elevate their experience, increase their libido, heal sexual reproductive issues, like I mentioned the woman before. And then my men's program is called Sexual Mastery for Men. That opens up in another couple of months, I guess. And that's all about how to help men to really embrace their masculine power, which again, I'm all for and celebrate and encourage in men. Love to see really masculine alpha men out there. And also their own sexual skills, how to build stamina, how to become multi-orgasmic, learning to control their and elevate their sexual expression and how to please a woman, all of the multi-orgasmic secrets to pleasing women.
Wonderful, Kim. Well, I think the work you're doing is so healthy and needed, and there's so much of a gap that you're filling with this. So thank you so much for your time and helping me to understand more and helping others to understand more about this untapped potential that we have.